welcome back to another episode of Misplaced Garage. Today, I'm going to be working on my 1973 Suzuki TS250. This basically is my dream bike, color and all. I think the orange is perfect, but it needs some love. I bought it about a year ago. I rode it a little bit. It wasn't running very good. I know I need to clean out the gas tank because there's probably some older gas in there since I rode it earlier this summer, and that was quite a few months ago. So I'm going to clean out the gas tank, clean out the carburetor, get it running, get it spotless, and then I've got a nice little piece to put on here. This is a bigger sprocket for the rear end. This bike was kind of geared for the highway, so it can actually go pretty darn quick. It's just, I don't ride this on the highway, so there's no reason to have it geared for the highway. I ride it on the trails, and I think this one will be perfect. This is about 2 more teeth, so it should, in theory, help it out a lot on the trails. Anyways, I'm gonna get started with taking the carburetor and the gas tank off so that I can clean it out. So, if this makes anybody know what I'm talking about, all this crusty stuff used to not quite be there, so I'm gonna take it off and give it a good shaking with vinegar and some metal bits in there just to get all that stuff out of there. I'm gonna have to block off the petcock, but not too bad. I unfortunately left ethanol gas in there, and this is what happens when you leave ethanol gas in a metal gas tank. So don't do that. Make sure you use ethanol free. Don't be dumb like me. Took the petcock out. It looks like that'll probably need a new gasket, but that's okay for now. I fashioned a little block off plate for it, so I'm gonna get some vinegar and pour it in there and shake it up, make sure there's some metal clanking around in there so I can get all of the rust off. But I fashioned this out of an old piece of flooring. Fortunately, I just had this laying here. Put a piece of little gas safe silicone between the two, so that should hold it sealed. So now if you want to do this, making a block off plate's pretty easy. You pretty much just use whatever you have. It doesn't have to be completely perfectly sealed unless you intend on leaving whatever liquid is in there overnight. I don't. So all I need is some vinegar, and the first time I do it I generally just kind of use the vinegar just to clean it out what's already in there. Then I'll throw some metal and like a substrate in there so it actually has something to act as like a sandpaper on the inside of the gas tank. So I now have that gas tank. I shook it up a lot, drained out a lot of vinegar. I then added some BBs and some vinegar to it, and I shook that up some more, and now I actually filled it all the way up to the brim, and I'm gonna leave it for now while I work on this so that it can create like chemical reactions and hopefully dissolve some of the rust. But it's a lot cleaner than it was. Not a whole bunch of flakes are coming off anymore, so it's better than it was already. And so I went through the carburetor, made sure all the orifices were clean. Pilot jet was a little bit gummed up, so I cleaned that out. Last time I rode this bike, it was a little lean in my opinion, so I went up a size in the main jet. I went from a 180 to a 190, so that'll make the mixture a little bit richer, thus giving the bike a little more gasoline. So if that has a negative impact, I'll just go back. Luckily on this one, I literally just take this bolt out, pull the, I don't know what you would call this, but pull this part out, slide it out. The main jet is on the end of this, which is kind of goofy, but it makes changing the jet so quick. You can do it in 5 minutes. So that's a cool feature of this one. Carburetor's cleaner, it's not perfect, but it's better than it was. And so to swap the sprocket on the back, you actually have to disassemble a lot of the rear suspension stuff. Or not rear suspension, but obviously you have to take the chain off and a couple other things. Why are you not cooperating? So now with most of the stuff loose here, should be able to undo this guy, undo should be able to kind of pop it out. Yep, there we go. Yes, my chain is pretty dry. Don't at me. That's a new one for me. There we are. The wheel is free. So now from here it's pretty self-explanatory. There are some safety features on these. They actually fold these metal tabs over so that the bolts can't back out. Thus, if the bolts back out, this whole part would fly off, and you don't want that. So this assembly is pretty much locked on there until you have to maintain it. You can see my current one has some pretty thin peaks. That means it's been used quite a bit. So not only is it time for a new one, but this one is a little bit bigger. But it's also looking like this sprocket is not going to fit, unfortunately. When I put it on there, those bolts do not line up. It's exactly what I was hoping for. Well, unfortunately, this bolt pattern is the incorrect size. I even pulled that old one off to see if those bolts could move, but they can't. So, MESOL on that front, but I'll have to find another 41 tooth sprocket for this bike. 41, maybe 42, because I think 42 would be awesome, but I think 41 is more realistic. When you're putting your chain back on, you want to make sure that your sprocket is straight in line with the other one. So, from my point of view, you would kind of get down here, look down the chain, and roll it, and make sure that the chain's not going like this. You want to make sure it's just a smooth, straightforward path, because if it's all crooked and stuff, it might throw itself off or do some damage to the sprockets. So I have let my gas tank sit overnight, and I moved it around a lot. Tried to get as much of that gunk off the sidewalls as possible. It's not going to be mint condition, but it's going to be better than it was, and it's going to keep gunk from going into the carburetor. Alright, well now like an hour or two later, I have a much cleaner gas tank. It's actually raw metal in there now, so that's a good sign. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was, that's for sure. I actually rinsed it out with some gasoline now, so I'm good to put some gas in it, and hopefully the seal on the petcock still works. Hopefully I didn't mess anything up there, but I don't believe so. I think this is like a 2.5 gallon tank, whereas this is only 1.5 gallons of gas, but nonetheless. There we go. We got some fuel in her. Done this a lot sooner. The reason I went up in a jet size is because once you got to the top end of the RPMs, it would pretty much just fall on its face. The 190 helped a ton. I might even go to a 200. see if that makes it any better, but I know that the 190 is better than the 170, the 180, and now we're here, so I'm very happy with this. I'm stoked. The bike's running great. Even though I made the mistake of putting ethanol in the gas tank, I actually got a much better finish than I did if I didn't, because I wouldn't have gone through the process and probably cleaned this gas tank, but that looks pretty darn good if I do say so myself. So basically, the problem with ethanol in old bikes and like small engines and things of that nature, basically what ethanol does is it absorbs water that is in the air, so it probably has a shelf life of a couple months, whereas ethanol free probably has a shelf life of 6 months to a year, somewhere in there, because it has no ethanol in it, so therefore it's not going to absorb any water, which, yes, it still will absorb a tiny bit of water, but nowhere near as much as like a 10% ethanol gas. In the long run, it's better for all of your components in your motorcycles, because ethanol eats away at seals in your carburetor, it eats away at pretty much everything rubber and things of that nature, so I'm very stoked that this is working as it should. Anyways guys, I'm gonna leave this video here. If you got any kind of enjoyment out of this video, please consider leaving a like and a comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.